Hello, everybody, and welcome to our virtual voter registration training. So this is a program that is being put on jointly between the Jewish Community Relations Council of the Jewish Federation of Howard County and the Martin Luther King Holiday Commission, Junior Holiday Commission. Both organizations would really like to do more social action engagement throughout the year. And since we are faced with the Martin Luther King holiday coming up in January 15th, we will be having a day of service activity at the Harriet Tubman Community Center on Harriet Tubman Lane, on January 15th. So that will be the first opportunity to put the new skills that you will learn here into practice. And then our hope is that as a group of committed volunteers, we will come up with other ideas and other places that we might do voter registration throughout the year leading up to this very consequential election cycle. Really quickly, so I'm Bonnie Sorak. I'm a member of Columbia Jewish Congregation. Let's just quickly go around the room. You can unmute yourself, and then Don, let's end with you, and you can introduce yourself and jump right into the presentation. All right, so we'll start. Shauna, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Thanks, Bonnie. I have the pleasure of working with Bonnie through the JCRC. I am the Director of Community Engagement at the Jewish Federation of Howard County, and the JCRC is one of the projects that I am lucky enough to work on. So thank you all for being here, and I'm excited to learn with you. Thanks for the opportunity.
Roz,
Sue Ellens.
Am I next? Sue
Ellen. Sorry. Sue Ellen Siegel. I belong to Benedict. I'm Lynn Zinner. I've done voter registration in Atlanta, which was really extremely satisfying, standing out on in front of Target and grabbing people and having them fill out the forms and such. I love voter registration, so that's why I'm here.
Julie.
Hi, I'm Julie Wade. I'm a member of Columbia Jewish Congregation and know Bonnie there, especially with the Green Team. And I've not done registration before, and I'm really excited to learn how to do that and volunteer for it.
You're still muted. Don, you're muted.
There, can you hear me now? Great. Okay, so my name is Dawn Sinclair, and I work with the Howard County Board of Elections. I'm the volunteer voter registration coordinator in that office. I've also spent many years up until recently scheduling and planning the voter outreach activities for the office. So I'm happy to be with you here today.
You should be able to share your screen with your slide deck.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so I actually do not have my presentation to share today. I sent that several weeks ago. So I was
you want me to share them?
Yes, if you could share it. My capabilities are a little bit more.
You're muted again. You muted yourself.
Okay, sorry about that. So yes, I'm just a little bit more limited where I am today.
Okay, so why don't you start talking and I will get in my folders and find it.
Okay, great. Okay, so the presentation that we have and that we're going to attempt to share with you is a very simple and straightforward. It's very short. A lot of it is common sense. First of all, I don't want you to feel intimidated by the process at all. It's really very simple, a process. And there are just a couple key takeaways that I'd like you to have from this when you start participating in your drives. Just tell me when you're ready to start.
Are you seeing it?
Yes, I do see
Okay.
it. Thank you.
There you go. Okay.
So the key takeaways that I'd like you to have primarily after watching this presentation is when you're out there dealing with the public, there's a couple key ideas we would like you to keep in mind. The first one would be when you're handing out forms to register, please make sure that you remind the voters to fill out the forms completely and accurately and in blue or black ink. So unfortunately, as you can probably imagine, it's very difficult sometimes to read these registration forms when they're written in pencil. So they really need to be filled out in blue or black ink as accurately and as completely as the voter can. So in this overview, you're going to learn basic voter registration laws and regulations so you can assist residents in completing the voter registration applications, also known as a VRA. And you notice on this slide, it just talks about if they need to make a correction, they can do so and initial the correction on the applications. They also have the ability to update their voter registration with this form. For example, if they have a name change, if they've moved, or if they simply just wish to change their political party. So in the state of Maryland, when you register to vote, you must be a Maryland resident, you must be a United States citizen, and you must not be under guardianship for a mental disability. And if you are, or if the person is, they could not have been found by a court to be unable to communicate a desire to vote. They also may not have been convicted of buying or selling votes. This again is making sure that as you are handing out the forms and as the voters are returning them to you, that you're just checking to make sure that they're filled out correctly, they're filled out completely and accurately. Please do make sure to maintain the voter confidentiality as you accept forms back from voters. Please make sure that they don't just remain visible on a table where another person could read someone's name and or address or party affiliation. Make sure that there's a safe and locked location where you could return these forms before they are brought back to our office. Please remember to remain neutral at all times. Please do not share your political views or suggest how a potential voter may choose to affiliate with one political party over another. A little bit more on this, sometimes people will make statements like, I don't like either political party. I don't like either the Democratic or the Republican Party. So I'm just not going to put anything in that box. I'm not going to check anything. A voter has the right to choose to leave the area blank on the application, but when it gets back into our office, we're going to register them as unaffiliated. when they make this choice. Now, this is not a problem, but what happens during a primary election is that they will only be eligible for a school board ballot during a primary election. A lot of people are not aware of this fact, and they become upset about it sometimes. So what this essentially means is, although they can choose to remain unaffiliated or another party, such as independent, however, not during a general election, but during a primary election, they will only be eligible to vote for school board candidates.
I have a question.
Yes, of course.
Is that something we should tell them preemptively, or is that something we should tell them only if they have a question about it?
There isn't really a hard and fast rule. Certainly, if they ask a question about it, you can say it's perfectly all right to leave it blank. However, if you choose to do so, you will be registered as unaffiliated, and it means you will only be able to vote for school board candidates in the next primary election. If they have further questions, sure, yeah. If they have additional questions, the best rule of thumb would be to refer them to our office for more information. Because we've found that sometimes these conversations can get kind of lengthy, and it may be difficult during a voter registration drive to actually answer them all. So the best rule of thumb is, if they certainly ask you, for example, or if they say something like, well, I'm just going to register as unaffiliated, but during the next election, I may decide to vote for Democratic or Republican candidates. If you get a feeling that they're making a comment like that, then you would want to state you can only vote for school board candidates if you choose to be unaffiliated or independent, for example. If you have more questions, you can contact the Board of Elections office. Another thing to keep in mind is they do have the ability, voters can decide to be one party, vote in that primary election, for example, choose their candidates, and then when the registration reopens after that election, they can then change their political party again if they choose to do so. It's not as if when they choose a party that they have to remain in that party for a number of years. Does that help, or is it still a little complicated?
That helps me. I was the one who asked the question, but
okay,
I'm good. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Dive into the step-by-step instructions.
Okay, here we are. So this, for example, is what a voter registration application would look like in the state of Maryland. The first question, as you see, is, are you at least 16 years old? Are you a U.S. citizen? So these questions must be answered. Now, we have situations, especially in schools, where students will register to vote, slightly under 16, say 15 and a half or 15 and 3/4, and that's fine. What we don't want to be doing is registering 13 and 14-year-olds at this point. So we're trying to get as close as we can to 16. The computer will then determine when they are eligible to vote. Okay, so in box 3, as you notice, it says, please print last name, first name, middle initial, suffix, etc. Nicknames are discouraged. So an example of that would be, for example, someone's name is Nicholas, but he registers as Nick. So really, people should be registering. It should correspond to their identification. For example, their Maryland driver's license.
We're on box 4 now.
Okay. So under box 4, as you can see, it says, please check male, female, unspecified, or other. Now, for example, a voter may choose to leave that blank. And of course, that is certainly his or her right to do so. However, if they choose to do that, we're going to choose unspecified or other for them. Box 5. So in this area, you have a space for the date of birth. Sometimes a voter will make a mistake and they will put the current year as their birth year. So we'd like to avoid that. Okay, box 6A, 6B, and 6C, personal identification numbers. For example, a valid Maryland driver's license can be used. That would include an MVA learner's permit as well. A voter may also use the last 4 digits of their social security number if they do not have an MVA issued ID card. And we do, lastly, if you see 6C, if a voter does not have a Maryland issued ID card or a social security number, which is not very common, okay? But if it happens, we do have additional ways to register people, and I'll explain that in just a second, okay? So for example, just getting back to that, if a voter indicates they don't have a social security number or a driver's license, a number, we can take additional information from them. For example, a copy of a passport, a copy of a bank statement that has their name and address printed on the statement, for example, or like a valid property lease or rental agreement. So what we're looking for is something that proves their name and address, essentially. And then they would have to then provide that information to us at a later date. So they do have a way to use that to register, but it's going to elongate the registration process. We don't normally recommend that unless truly the voter, they don't have anything else. So sometimes I think there's something on the last line here that says ensure confidential residents have completed a VRA. So there are some voters, for example, that say that they wish to be remain confidential and they don't want their name and address to remain on the public record. We do have some ways to handle that. The best way, though, to handle something like that would be, though, to refer them to our office. Okay, so residential address, box 7. This sometimes causes confusion because sometimes a voter will move and they'll say they will think that they want to keep their new residence private. They don't want to share it with us. For example, they may have a post office box and they'll try to put that in their residential address instead of providing their new address. So unfortunately, that doesn't work. You can't be registered at a post office box. And not only that, we want to ensure that they're getting the proper ballot. In order to get the proper ballot, we need to know where they physically reside, not just where they secure a post office box.
Is there an option for someone who might be unhoused?
Excuse me. Yes, there are. For example, if a voter is homeless, sometimes what we can do in that situation is we can use their last Maryland address, and then we can list our address as the mailing address. For example, the address of the Howard County Board of Elections. So that is certainly an option for them because we want to make sure that they too have the opportunity to register to vote or update their registration if they choose to do so.
I can imagine that can get complicated because then which ballot we send them if they're homeless in the new location as opposed to where they used to live.
That's
I see
right.
you have check here if you reside in Baltimore City. What is that?
Well, that's just that's just information. Now, obviously, that's not going to have an effect on Howard County voters. But for example, people who actually live in Baltimore City, I guess, as far as the form is concerned, they want to determine who is actually in the city limits, as opposed to say who is actually in Baltimore County, for example. So I guess it helps them with, determining the proper property address registration. Okay, so this is an opportunity in box 8. If a voter truly has a mailing address where they wish to receive their mail, they can certainly provide that information in box 8. And then we will be able to mail them voting information to their mailing address. So sometimes voters will ask you your opinion. You would just say, like I talked about before, that you're not allowed to give an opinion. It's up to them to select a party. If they don't select a party, they'll be registered as unaffiliated. And then if you see at the bottom, it says the voter must be registered Democratic or Republican to participate in that party's election. Which would be the primary election. And the other thing is, you can also say to a person, they can, as long as they're not approaching a deadline, that they can always take the voter registration form with them and go online and do research on various political parties, and then make an educated opinion as to which party they choose to affiliate with, and then turn in the application later after they've had time to make a decision. Box 10, contact information is not required. It's suggested, but it's not required. For example, where it can come in handy is sometimes, for example, we can't read the form and we're approaching a deadline and we're trying to get them registered. We can't tell the street name they've provided to us. We can't find it. So it can impact our ability to get them registered quickly. So that's why we actually make that suggestion. Assistance in election of box 11. Okay, so this is not required in any way to register to vote. If they do choose to check either box, 11 just means that you need help in voting. And that means that we send out some information in the mail, which is considered polling place assistance. Okay. The next line just says you'll be interested in becoming an election judge. And that means we would also follow up with the voter with information pertaining to working as an election judge for the Howard County Board of Elections. Keep in mind, and I will just say this, any voter may seek assistance at any time within a polling place, even if he or she has never checked that they need polling place assistance. Box 12, oath and signature. So the voter must sign and date the form. So for example, if they forget to sign it, we have to return it back to them and get a signature, which of course would delay their voter registration. So we want to try to avoid that if we can. And if a person is unable to sign his or her name, as you see on there, it says that the person can make an X on the assistance line. And off to the side, you can add assisted by, and then you can print your name. And that will serve as a valid signature. Please note the upcoming election dates. The presidential primary is Tuesday, May 14th. The deadline to register is Tuesday, April 23rd. Also, the dates for the presidential election are listed. Please ensure that all voter registration forms arrive in our office 1 week before the deadlines. For more information on elections and voting and deadlines, you can always visit elections.maryland.gov. It has a lot of good information regarding registering to vote, updating voter registration, and even signing up to become an election judge. Please contact with any further questions. After a while of doing this, a lot of times we find that questions can come up long after these presentations. So you can certainly email me. You can call me at the office as well. I do have voicemail set up, which I do check. Also, our Deputy Director, Charlotte Davis, we work together in tandem for the volunteer voter registration process. So either of us could assist you in this endeavor. And are there any more questions?
I have a couple.
Go ahead, Julie. I have a couple too. So you go first.
So the activity that's planned for Martin Luther King Day is in Columbia, but anybody from Maryland could be registering, right?
Absolutely.
Not just Howard County. And
Yes.
so if they had questions, would they go to their own county office?
Yes.
Or
That's a very good question. So that form that I showed you is a statewide form. It's valid for the entire state. If we were to get forms from another county, that's fine. We have a process to forward those forms, and we will do so in a timely fashion for you. That is not something that you have to worry about. But if they do have questions, they should contact their local Board of Elections, and they can Google, for example, Carroll County Board of Elections or Anne Arundel County Board of Elections, for example, and they can get all of that contact information. Additionally, it may be located on the back side of the voter registration application form as well.
Great. And they can take the form with them if they
True.
prefer, right? And
Absolutely.
are there instructions on how to get it back to the office?
Yes, I believe we do have some voter registration forms that actually have the return address on the back of the form, so they could certainly mail it themselves. They can give it to you to return to us, and then we will forward it on. It's a matter of his or her personal preference. We do ask that if you do return a group of forms, that you do so on a timely basis. Although it's not as important now, it's very important as of deadlines, because
Right.
we want to make sure that we're keeping up with the workload as much as possible, and we don't want their registration to become delayed in the event that, say, for example, some form sat in a car. And not only that, of course, then their confidential information could be compromised
Right.
as well.
And you said people can use this opportunity to update their registration, right? So is that
Fine.
just a new form, or is there a place, do they let you know in any way that they've already registered and this is an update?
I believe on the top of the form, it does say, for example, if it's a new registration, if it's a change or update, or an address change, for example. So people will, however, I've had people indicate it's an address change and they're moving from out of state. So
Right,
you
so
can't
that would
always,
be new. Yeah,
right, yeah. So
Right.
the thing is, you can't always rely on what they check, but sometimes it is accurate.
right. And one more thing, maybe so do 16-year-olds vote in Maryland, in any elections in Maryland?
That's actually a very good question, because if you're registering students, for example, I know I've worked a lot in the high schools with voter registration, and it can be a little confusing. So the law is you can register to vote at 16. However, you are not able to vote until you are 17 and turning 18 on or before the date of the
Oh.
general election.
I remember that. Yeah.
So that's what it is. So they are allowed to be registered for quite some time before they're actually eligible to vote. Then what will happen for 16-year-olds is a letter will go out that will tell them that although they are registered to vote, that they are unable to vote in the upcoming election because they are under 18 or, they haven't
Right.
met the date requirements, something to that effect, but that they are in the system, and when they become the actual age, they'll be ready to go.
Oh, good way to get them involved, I guess.
Yes, well, yeah, it is. And the thing is it's a way, the MVA will ask them often. A lot of people don't know this, but when they go to get a learner's permit or a driver's license, a lot of times the MVA will ask them if they wish to register to vote. In fact, a lot
Good.
of times they say yes, and the parents don't even know. So that is
Interesting.
definitely an option for them.
Thanks for all my questions.
Sure, absolutely.
Anyone else? I have a list too. But do you have any questions? No? Okay. So first, how do people know that their registration has been processed? Like, so how do we let them, I know do you get a card in the mail, or is there a
Yes.
place that they can check if they haven't
Absolutely.
received the card in the mail? Where do they go to find out?
Absolutely. So we mail something called a voter notification card, and we normally mail that within a few weeks. And we normally send out a bulk mailing. Now, the time of year will determine how frequently. As we get closer to an election, we'll be sending them out weekly. Okay. At a time like now, we might be sending them out twice a month, for example. But it's a green and white card, and it will come out. It'll have their name and address on it. It will show their political party. It will show their polling place, for example. And although these cards are not required in voting, they're for informational purposes only. That way the voter knows the registration has been processed. But again, they do not have to bring it to a polling place. A lot of people do, but it's not required.
Okay, thank you. And so you mentioned that that the forms, once they're completed, we need to get them to you as soon as possible. So
Yes.
they have to be physically brought to the office. So a person can bring them to
Well,
the office.
I know, I apologize. I have a terrible habit of saying all the time. I'm doing it again, but so yes, we prefer that you bring them in person, simply because that way we don't have, they're not going to get lost in the mail, if they're returned in person. However, on a remote chance that someone was, doing a registration, from a county, for example, that was not close to us and it was very inconvenient, it could, of course, be mailed to us, but we do prefer that they're returned to us quickly in person.
So as a coordinator, we would do this if someone just collects them all and brings them all.
Yes.
Okay.
That's exactly right.
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Roz, because I wrote all mine down.
I'm sorry. I thought you were done. I remember in Atlanta, there were frequently people who didn't know if they were registered or which county or whether it's their old address or not. Is there a website that we can look up and give them an answer?
Of course. So the one that I mentioned on one of the slides was elections.maryland.gov, and Maryland is, of course, spelled out. But it's a great website. It's a great tool for voters, and it's great for you ladies as well, because you can get a lot of information about voting and a lot of good information to provide to the public when they have questions. And so they can click on an icon on that website to check on the voter information, and they can also determine their polling place. It's just a really good source. And of course, that website is from the Maryland State Board of Elections, so it's a secure website. It's not a third party. It's the Maryland State Board of Elections statewide website.
I think what Roz was at, so can they go on and find out, yes, I am registered, or
Yes.
oh, no, I'm not, so they can go there and find it.
Yes, they can check. Yeah, they can check on their information. And then if, for example, the website cannot locate them, then that would be an indication that that they're not registered. It could also indicate that there is some information, some sort of conflicting information regarding a name or an address change. So, but at least it would give them a clue that they need to delve into it a little bit farther so we can try to determine the issue.
So I'm going back to the form. So on the one where it had the birth date, where they write in their birthday, does it matter? Does if it's spelled out in letters, or you want numbers? Like, it does have to be like 2-digit month and 2-digit year day and 4-digit year, or you want the month spelled out? What's the preferred method?
Okay, so we're not that picky about that. It's just we'd like it to be legible. If they prefer to use numbers, that's fine, or if they prefer to write the month out. Either way, it's just important to be legible so that we can try to make sure that we get the correct birthday in the system for them.
So I think I know the answer to this question. Do you need election judges? And is that something, like, where do people find out what it takes to be an election judge, how they could qualify, what training is needed for them? Like, is that also on that same website, or do you want us to talk that up to people?
Sure. Absolutely. What I say about that is that we always need election judges. And the funny thing is, even when you think you have enough, strangely, what happens prior to an election is that you have people who have to quit because they have medical issues or they have a family issue or something unexpected happens. And so we also hire what we call alternate judges, judges that can be called the day of the election or the night before and told that we do have a spot for them. So the short answer is yes, we always need judges. We always want to encourage everyone who is interested to just oh great. I just saw that it looks like Shauna just filled out. Yeah, yay, yay. The way I look at this is I've had many a late night in the office calling people, asking them, you haven't been a judge for 4 years. Don't you think you really want to come back? And I can tell you I've got varied responses, but not always yes. So this is what I say. We want to encourage people. We want to make sure that we're honest and straightforward about what that job is. The job is going to pay around $250. For returning judges who are returning, sometimes they're eligible for an additional 100, which would get that up at $350. So there is more of a financial incentive now, but we also want to state that it's a long day. It's about 15 hours, 6 a.m. till about 9 o'clock. You cannot leave the polling place for the day. You can have food delivered. You can bring food, but you can't leave. So, and if you basically can't leave, you can't leave to walk your dog. You can't leave for reasons like that. And so for some people, that's very hard. We try to be very honest about it. But people just don't realize, for example, Howard County Board of Elections, we can't run all these polling places by ourselves. So chances are we need election judges. I think we hire around 1,100. We may have decreased or combined some of the polling places, so we may be not needing as many as we have had or needed in previous years. But the short answer is we always need judges. And so I would always suggest, for example, that website, elections.maryland.gov. There's a spot you can click on to sign up to be an election judge there. I think our website, howardcountymd.gov/BOE, there's a spot where you can sign up to be a judge on our website as well. So that's the fastest way to do it, is to sign up online, because you're providing your personal information. In some cases, you might be providing some availability. The other thing is that not only are you helping the community and helping the voters at large, you're certainly helping us to handle the business of elections. And there is a lot involved. When you come to training, you'll find out about that. You are required to attend training, which is roughly like a 2.5 hour to 3 hour training class. Some of the classes are done via Google. Okay. But we also have open house training that's available for any judge that's interested or just simply feels like they'd like to experience more hands-on training. The open house is usually offered a few weeks prior to the election.
So it's not just on election days, though, because we have extended election periods now, right? So like it's the week before, so you don't only need election judges on election day, you might need they need them the week before at various locations too.
Exactly, exactly. So we have about 8 days of early voting,
Right.
in addition to the election days. And sometimes we need assistance with early voting. Now, if you get hired to be an election judge, we can't guarantee days of early voting to everyone, of course. But there are some opportunities for people who are interested in working more days. So that is sometime an option. And I believe that we're going to have about 5 early voting centers. So our early voting centers have increased a little bit. So again, that increases the opportunities for people that wish to work as judges. And the other thing that I would say, so I mean, you get the financial reward, you help us help the voters, but you also gain a much deeper understanding about the American voting process. That's just impossible to obtain by just going in yourself and voting and then leaving. If you spend that many hours just being a witness to this process, you can't really help but gain a deeper understanding.
I did go one day to watch as the ballots were being, tallied, and how there
Right.
was a Republican and a Democrat sitting next to each other, and they were both looking at the ballots and all that, and it was very, very impressive. As far as getting supplies to do a registration, bye, Shauna. Thanks so much.
Bye. Thank you.
To pick up supplies for a registration drive, like how do we get this? We just need to come by and pick some up. Do you mail them out? And how do we know? We have no idea like how many people we will need.
Of course. So we're more than happy to provide some forms to you. Our forms can be helpful because, as I said, they have the address of various boards of election right on the reverse side, which can be helpful for the voter. So we generally give out like 25 or 50 forms. Then if you have other drives and you need more, we can certainly provide you with more forms. Additionally, you can print out your own voter registration forms at elections.maryland.gov. If you ever got into a bind where you wanted to have a drive and our office was closed, it's something just came up unforeseen, you can always print them out for free yourself online.
And if we wanted to concentrate a drive in an area where voter registration is low, is that where would we be able to get that kind of information? Is there a way to know that?
I can tell you, I know I don't have that information offhand, but I'm sure that there is a way that we would be able to obtain some statistics on that. And again, that might be something that the state could help us with further. Of course, off the top of my head, Howard County, I really wouldn't have that information. But that's something we can certainly, do some research on, and I'm sure determine more about.
Okay. And then what about if people don't speak English well? Like, does the form come in other languages, or do you know how to read Chinese?
Well, that's a very good question, because basically the population, the various for example, Montgomery County has a larger Spanish-speaking population than we do in Howard. So Montgomery County, I believe, is required to have Spanish voter registration applications. I do believe you can also print out foreign language voter registration applications at the state website that I previously mentioned. I don't know how many languages they have available, but I would think that they would certainly have Chinese and Spanish. So as our population evolves in Howard County, and as the population increases, with that increase would involve state mandates, which would determine that we would have various foreign language applications in the office. We haven't reached that determination yet in Howard County in our office, so we just have the English forms. But as I said, if you go online, the state will have other languages available.
And I think two more, and then I think I'm done. So
Okay.
once they are registered and they have verified, they either got their little green and white card in the mail, or they went online and checked that that they can confirm that they're registered. I know that I really appreciate when I get a sample ballot ahead of time, so that I can like, some of some things are worded difficult, like you really want to read it.
Right, exactly. Or
So
maybe more than
so
once.
going through this process, does that mean that they will receive a sample ballot for their area? Is that how that works?
Yes. Yes, a sample ballot is an exact replica of the ballot that they can expect to receive. In fact, people will often bring the sample ballot into the polling place with them to vote to help them remember their choices, and they're certainly allowed to do so. And yes, that is something that they can certainly expect, and that again is why we want to keep the information updated. Um, all the time, because what can happen then is that their sample ballot, if it's not updated, will go to the wrong address. Then it will be returned to the post office, and then it comes to us and we have to try to get their address updated. We have a process by which we do that, but it can certainly delay their mail getting to them. And as we get closer to an election, that's we want to avoid that as much as possible.
So now, having completed this wonderful training, thank you very much, Dawn.
You're
Does that
welcome.
mean we can register voters anywhere in the state? Like now, right? So the form
Yeah.
is statewide. So if I happen to see an announcement and it's somewhere else, I can go and register people there. Just we would be returning those ballots, those registration forms to that county as opposed to bringing it.
It absolutely does, and I'm glad that you asked a quick question because it just reminded me that I wanted to tell you this. Okay, so first of all, what we're doing right now is not even required by the state. The state used to require volunteer voter registration training. They stopped that. We continue to do this because we want to be able to assist voters and assist the volunteers with helping the voters. And we realize that we have a voice in this. We're processing the applications, and it really serves everyone if we're getting the applications filled out correctly. It helps everyone, especially the voter and us. Well, and us, to be quite honest. So what we're doing right now is not required by law. In fact, any person can register any other person to vote. And I know that that seems, that's probably not the best idea. But right now there is no state law that requires training.
Oh, I said that was my last question, but I just thought of another one. So, I mean, does it help you all if we have a computer that's available where we can just show them the website and they can just do it online and not do the paper one, and that they, right then and there, they've updated it through the computer, and then we eliminate that paper?
Absolutely. I mean, because what's going to happen is when someone registers online, that's information is sent to us. We then process it and then ensure that that card is mailed out to them within a few weeks. If a person is comfortable using someone else's laptop, some people are suspicious about the security and that sort of thing. But if they want to do it online, it is a very simple process. They would need to have their identification with them, because they would have to plug in that information into the website.
So if we had a QR code, like if we made a QR code of the website, they can do it from their own phone, right? They could just,
Yeah, in many cases, they can do it from their phone.
and then they wouldn't have to use somebody else's computer, and they could just do it, and they would be done there.
That's another idea. I don't know, like, for example, as far as, I think I've also requested a mail-in ballot from my phone, and it was a little more lengthy. I'm not sure I would suggest people trying to do that on their phone, but certainly registering to vote on their phone, they can do.
Okay.
If they prefer not to
And-
use someone else's computer.
And then you mentioned, like, if they don't have a driver's license, do they have to send a copy of something in with it? Like, so they don't, like, what are you looking for? Would they have to mail you a copy of their lease or their bank statement or something that would go in with the ballot, with the
Right.
registration form?
Well, they would have to provide a copy of other information, but usually that's going to involve a phone call to us and us talking to the voter directly, because we don't want them to waste time and send something, for example, that won't work. Now, there's a lot of things that will work, like a BG&E statement, for example, a Verizon bill, a paycheck stub, a property lease. There's a lot of things that will work, but in many cases, it's probably better to refer them to us so that we can give them a little bit more guidance. And especially as we get closer to deadline, because if they're mailing something, we want to make sure that they're doing it quickly so that they can get registered. And again, remember that we offer same-day registration. So even people that miss drives can be told that they can go and register to vote on election day and during the early voting period. Now, as a result, when they're in a polling place, chances are good it's going to take them longer in the facility. It's not like they're just going to check in, vote, and leave. You know, they're going to have to show some information, and there's a process to follow. But they still have that opportunity if they happen to miss other voter drives.
And if they do that, doesn't it then become a provisional ballot until it's all confirmed? Is that?
Well, the thing is that it's kind of complicated in the sense that we have to be able to try to locate them within an MVA database, in other words. So what would happen is if we can't locate them, they can still register to vote. But in many cases, they would be a provisional voter. So we would have to, which would mean that their ballot, they'd have to look at it and look at the voter registration and see if we can verify their identity. If a person is in the MVA database and we can verify them on the spot with a license, they just go in, they register to vote, and they vote on the equipment.
So Roz, I know you haven't. Roz has an appointment, so last chance.
Okay.
Anything? You're good. All right. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Julie
good
has
luck.
One more question. Looks like. Okay.
Thank you.
Looks like Julie has one more question.
Thank you very much.
Hi.
Well, I'm surprised by the on-site registration. So the deadline for registration is, what's the deadline for? If you can register when you vote.
Very good point. A lot of people have asked that question. It's really more of a soft deadline than a hard deadline. But that being said, for us, it's still very important because we have a lot of work that we need to get into the system as of a certain date. So it does. So even if the voters miss that, they still have an opportunity. So this state is very good about giving people numerous opportunities to register to vote.
Right.
And we certainly don't recommend that people avoid deadlines and just go register to vote in an early voting center. They do have the ability to do that, but that doesn't mean it's a best practice because, for example, if it's a very busy election, if it's a presidential election, they may go into a polling place and there may be lines and people that need to register to vote. It's hard to say. I don't think it's been that much of a problem as of late. The last election was a gubernatorial, but presidentials can be very busy, and they might find an example when they're in line for 45 minutes or an hour because they need to do the same day registration, and there's only going to be maybe one or two people doing that in the early voting centers.
Right. Got it. Thanks.
Sure.
All right, Dawn, thank you so much. This was so invaluable. We had about another 10 or 15 people that had signed up that let us know they couldn't come at this time, which is why we recorded this. And so we will share that we're going to have this and share this with them. So we have a whole bunch of new folks trained to get some people registered to vote this year. So thank you so much for taking time to do this.
Sure, you're very welcome. And I hope your drives are very successful. And as I've said, if you have any questions or concerns, you can certainly call me or email me.
So if I want to come by and get forms for January 15th, just let you know, or just stop by and just get.
Yeah, I would say just email me, and then what I'll do is I'll have them left under your name at the front desk.
Great, very good.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your service, your very, very important job that you do. Really, really appreciate. I know that you guys are undervalued and overworked, and
sometimes. Well, thank you, and thanks again so much for what you do.
Thanks. All right. Take care.
Okay, take care.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.